Okay, so let's take a quick look at PSoC Creator. I'm going to look at the kits here in the middle and pick the PSoC6 Pioneer kit. And we're going to look at the EINK and CapSense example. And you can see that it brings up several tabs here, vertical tabs in the middle. One is this source code, which is all the source code associated with this example. We have the EINK library, PSoC interface files, header files, source files, and this is both for the Cortex M0 here and the Cortex M4 down here. So we can see that this project is mainly being done by the Cortex M0. The second tab is the components. If we click on anything in any of these tabs, it will show up in the middle panel here. So for example, if I pick any of these, display.h, it shows up here in the middle. And I can close it if I don't want to watch it. And so here we have the top design, which just shows the components that are in here. So the CapSense is one of the things we're using. It looks like it's using the LED, a couple of LEDs, and here we have the EINK library. The next thing down here is documentation. So anything that we click on here will show up in the browser. So we have the browser here that's brought up, and we can click on this PDF to get the data sheet for that particular device family. So all of these resources for documentation are accessible from within PSoC Creator, and it will bring up the data in an appropriate browser window. Results are after you do a compile or something, you'll see the listing files, I believe. So in the middle here we have some tools that we can use to create drawings and connections in the application. And over on the right we have the resources available. So in the Cypress chip we have analog resources like if we click on this, we can see there's an analog to digital converter, amplifiers, multiplexers, comparators, DACs, and so on. There's also CapSense resources, communications resources. It's showing Bluetooth, low energy, I2C, I2S, PDM to PCM, that's a fixed function, SPI, and UART. There's digital resources, functions, and logic, like pulse width modulation, quadrature decoding, logic functions, flip-flops. Wow, lots of stuff in there. Registers, control and status, utilities, a down counter, UDP block enable, or is that clock enable, sorry. Ports and pins, so analog pins, digital pins, and system things like clocks and DMA, EEPROM emulation, real-time clock. So lots of internal resources, and we can just drag these things over onto the application space, and we can go into each one and set it up. I believe somehow, yep. Click on it. So we can set up the properties of each of these things by clicking on them, and we can bring in more things, and use the connection tools to connect them up. I don't know if that's going to work, but you get the idea. And I don't really need this stuff here, so I'm deleting it. But you can easily draw schematics and so on of what's going on inside your chip, and it will automatically bring in the appropriate APIs and software drivers and so on that work with these things, so that you don't have to do a lot of that programming. It's all done for you, and the compiler will automatically build these things into your project. We can also bring in off-chip resources here, which have a bunch of active components like buffers and comparators, op-amps, regulators, diodes, and electromechanical components, relays, motors, connectors, switches, passive components, inductors, potentiometers, power components like batteries, and we can bring in sensors, thermistors, thermocouples, strain gauges. We can bring in transistors of all descriptions, and these things can be showing up in here as a schematic to indicate what's going on outside of the chip, and it's a good way to document a project. It's all in one place. The PSoC creator handles all of it. The off-chip resources are not necessary for the thing to work, but they really help to show what's going on in your project. So what I did here was I'm going to collapse this EINK library and go into screen contents down here, because I made a couple of changes. In here is some of the text that shows up. This application just displays text on the EINK display, so this is the 8 pages of MCU features description, and then following that is 7 pages of kit features, and I modified, like for example, down in the EINK display area, I had modified the resolution and the fact that it's an SPI interface. So I will recompile that and demonstrate what it looks like on the actual device. I just wanted to make sure that I could compile with changes. These are pretty trivial changes, just changing the text that gets displayed, but it tests out the whole compiler chain and make sure that everything's working properly. And that's a quick introduction to the PSoC creator and what you can do with it. I didn't discuss the tools up here, but basically there's build tools, application generation, and programming the actual device. And of course these things are all available through menus as well. But it's a pretty comprehensive development environment, and I really like the way that we can drag all these resources into a project, and it automatically brings in all the required software to run these things. So when you do a configuration of one of these components in your application and you build it, it automatically does all the programming necessary to initialize those components properly. Really slick and really powerful. But I'm going to switch over and do a little demo of the program that I changed.